Welcome to Fantasy Football Live here on Yahoo Sports. If you made it this far, you are among the elite in the final four of your Fantasy Football League. We've got our usual crew here, but we're holidayed up. Right? We got our holiday sweaters on. We've got Matt Harmon, we've got Chris Allen, and we've got the Grinch, Justin Boone. The Boone, I don't know how you're going to talk the whole time, but good God, the Grinch, well done by you, Santa Grinch. That's all he has to say. This is going to be the best show ever. We're going to be down one analyst. Harmon, how we feel? The funny thing is that Boone went full Grinch. Harmon, you've gone partial Grinch with your holiday sweater. How we feeling, buddy?
Yeah, right. As usual, Boone does me one-ups me here. I've got the just the regular Grinch sweatshirt. He went full Grinch face, but yeah, that's because I'm really focused on giving you analysis today. You know, I'm doing the Christmas thing, but I'm focused on being able to talk to the people. Justin, Boone is back. Good to see Santa Claus is here now.
Now he's Santa Boone.
Just glad I can breathe.
Yeah, that's
not a lot of airflow in that mask. I don't know if I would have made it the whole show if I left it on. So glad to be out of it and breathing freely here.
Chris Allen, how we feeling this morning? We've gone full gingerbread man.
Yeah, we're going full gingerbread man and a little bit of some. Santa trying to give some good tidings or glad tidings for this holiday season, because I know, especially over the past couple of weeks, the amount of stress, the level of emotions that have been going out, whether we're talking about Joe Burrow's comments to the media or even just fantasy managers that are somewhat stressed about their upcoming matchups. I'm just here to just have a way to say that let's play free. Let's have some fun here, fellas. And especially now that we're this deep into the playoffs, I mean, we'll give the people what they want, but at the same time, let's try and give some merriment along the way, especially between Boone's, costume, Matt trying to be serious. I mean, let's have some fun, fellas.
I like this. Okay, so I went full Christmas sweater. I've got my little snowman guy, and he's got a little nose that protrudes out. It's great. He's got a little scarf. I felt good about this, but Boone elevated the whole game. So we're going to elevate this thing, just see if maybe, I had to bring it up a notch. So we're going to go full. There we go.
Oh, my gosh.
On my head. And you know what? This looks so good, I might just do the whole show this way. Well see. We're just going to see how it goes. Now we got Santa. Now we've got
This
Rudolph,
is better than the zebra.
Yeah, well,
I don't know if it's better than the zebra. Debatable.
Top the zebra.
The zebra sent me on a run. I went on a
true.
Fantasy football run with the zebra. Let's see if Rudolph can do the same for me. All right, let's check out the actives and inactives so far. Notable injury updates for you. T. Higgins. I love everybody's in their Christmas sweaters. T. Higgins active. Drake London expected to play. Marvin Harrison Jr. expected to play. Woody Marks expected to play. We will get into Marvin Harrison Jr. a little later in the show. I should note Schefter says the Cards plan to ease him in. Cam Wolf has this tweet for us that gets us a little updated on some of these injuries too. Cam says Bills wide receiver Keon Coleman will be a healthy inactive today. Per source, that's a coach decision, not discipline related. Recently activated off IR, wide receiver Mecole Hardman Jr. will play in his place. So Keon Coleman, which has been a wild experiment for the Bills, continues to look difficult. Gentlemen, let's get into what we are watching. What do you got your eyes on, Boone, for Santa Boone? What do you got our eyes on in Week 16?
Well, I mean, every year we have players come out of nowhere and end up being like these fantasy heroes in the playoffs. And I think this week we got a couple backup running backs that are moving into starting roles who could be that guy. One is Michael Carter on the Cardinals. The other is Audric Estime on the Saints. Never thought I'd be saying that. And Carter's the more obvious play this week. We've seen the Cardinals backfield have a lot of fantasy success regardless of who's been back there, from James Conner to Trey Benson to Bam Knight. Now it's going to be Carter. Last week, played 80% of the snaps, had a pretty good game in the process, 94 scrimmage yards. It's the second time that he's seen at least 15 touches this year. The other time was earlier in the season, and it was an easier matchup against the Titans. Came away with 73 and a touchdown in that game. So we know he can be productive when he gets the work. Today, he's going to get the work against the Falcons. I think he's somebody you could slot in your lineup potentially as a low-end RB2. He's a guy that I'm going to be playing a lot of places this week for sure. And then for Audric Estime, this one's a little more up in the air because Evan Hall's also in that backfield. They split some snaps last week. It was kind of like a 55-45 split between them. But Devin Neal's on IR. Somebody's going to get the work against the Jets. The Jets are a great matchup. They're allowing the second most fantasy points to running backs this year. So we could see both these guys put up sort of RB3 flex value. If I had to pick between them, Estime was the one who was getting more of the passing work last week. I would go with him. I like him a little better talent-wise as well. But like I said, I think this is more of a desperation play as like an RB3 with some upside, but I think Estime could be that guy.
Chris Allen, what you got your eyes on for week 16?
So one of the things I'm thinking most fantasy managers will be looking for this week are just games with the potential to shoot out. Not a lot of those 50-point projected totals. So I'll cover a couple of matchups where we could see some big fantasy names pop off. So I'll start with the Bucs-Panthers game, or better known as the battle for who doesn't want the NFC South after last week. But at least last Thursday, we saw Baker Mayfield have one of his better statistical outings. His passing success rate was over 45% for the first time since playing against the Patriots in week 10. And most of that credit goes to Mike Evans, who is at about a 36-37% target rate. And you can tell how much more confident Mayfield was ripping those passes to Mike Evans down the perimeter. Well, at least until he confidently threw one of those passes directly to D. Alford. But anyway, seeing some of the down-to-down efficiency start to come back for the Bucs passing game should at least give him the edge going up against Carolina to try and take control of the NFC South. But I think the biggest question for fantasy managers is going to be this Jags-Broncos game. I mean, Trevor Lawrence last week, 0.73 EPA per dropback. I mean, highest or career mark from an efficiency standpoint for Trevor Lawrence. And honestly, for me, it's less about the results and just more about that Liam Cohen, Trevor Lawrence connection. I mean, targeting his pass catchers on play action concepts, 161 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, it's no wonder that they signed Jacoby Myers to an in-season multi-year extension, because he really is kind of the straw that stirs the entire drink of this Jags passing offense, regardless of if you're getting contributions from BTJ, Parker Washington, even Brenton Strange, or the RBs on eligible routes. But I think in that game, Bo Nix is probably going to be the biggest wild card. Fitz, you noted a few weeks ago Nix's struggles against zone coverage. I mean, we knew about it. He knew about it. Shoot, everybody knew about it. The Packers knew about it as well. I mean, that's why Nix only saw man coverage on about 10% of its dropbacks. But against the Packers, I mean, against zone, 25 targets, 17 receptions, 226 yards, and 4 touchdowns against zone coverage. And so with the Jaguars playing a similar style of offense, mixing up their coverages, Cortland Sutton should remain in the wide receiver 2 conversation, so on and so forth. But all this production that I'm talking about hinges on these quarterbacks who have had ups and downs throughout the entire season, but they've shown flashes as of late to really be the key factors of this Week 16 slate.
Yeah, one of the most under-talked about stories is Bo's getting better against those coverages. Let's see what that means for the Broncos in the playoffs. All right, Grinch, Harmon, what do you got as the storyline you're watching this week?
Yeah, the greatest Christmas present you guys could give me here is to allow me to do a little bit of receiver dork analysis here. Talk about George Pickens and what to expect here after he has let you down really the last 2 weeks. And last week, going back and watching that game, there's a lot of, narratives about George Pickens. Is he loafing around out there? What's the effort level? I personally didn't find any problem with his effort last week. To me, it was just more good old-fashioned, this is what happens in football when you are the ISO X receiver on the vast majority of your snaps. And for Pickens this year, he has taken just 8% of his snaps in the slot this season. That is the lowest rate for any starting receiver in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. Only Pickens, Rashad Bateman, and Kayshon Boutte / Kyle Williams are below 10%. So it is a very old school role that George Pickens is in. Frankly, I have not charted a receiver season in a good passing offense where the number one guy is over 90% of their snaps outside in like almost a decade. It has been a minute since we've seen a top level receiver be used like that. Obviously, Pickens is not the number one in Dallas. He's the number 2. And when you're in that X receiver role, you can just be zoned out of the game. And that's a lot of what happened last week against the Minnesota Vikings, where they just used brackets to that side, cloud coverages, put a safety over the top, cover 2, whatever you want to say. And at that point, when you've got a quarterback behind an offensive line that's dealing with some injuries, you're a quarterback playing in chaos, you're just not getting to that throw in the progression. And for Pickens this week, he's going against another defense that uses zone coverage at a high rate in the Los Angeles Chargers. And it's one of the best secondaries that play in zone coverage in the entire NFL. So I think if you have George Pickens here, you have to hope that he just gets one shot into the end zone, a red zone situation in a potentially high scoring game. Otherwise, I think you've got to be prepared for, narratives aside, whatever, you got to be prepared for maybe a little bit of a volatile week for him. I'm not saying bench him, but I think you've got to downgrade him a little bit in your mind here just because of the coverage and his role on this team.
It's amazing how more complicated everything gets as we get late in the season, which brings me to my main point, and that's what to do with quarterback changes. There's a couple of them this week that are absolutely going to change your fantasy football season. You spent all year making sure you had everything right, and then all of a sudden Mahomes goes down, and the Chiefs have made basically their entire team inactive. So what's it going to look like with Gardner Minshew at the quarterback position and the Chiefs sitting everybody that's even had a hangnail this season in a matchup, against the Titans that's not a good football game, but it doesn't matter. What matters to you is your production is just going to free fall if you have any Chiefs on your roster. And then, that one's easier than Miami. I'm sitting here looking at Miami trying to figure out how many of us need Achane to go off and be the key to winning our league. And now we're sitting here saying with Quinn Ewers, remember what happens with young quarterbacks when they first get in the game. This is a trend for the last 2 years. Route simplify, everything's get the ball out of the hands quickly at the line of scrimmage. Everything is don't make them read too much, don't make them process too much, just get the ball out. If that's what they do in Miami, well, everything is going to get easier and easier to defend. Even though this is a junk Bengals defense, sorry, Chris, even though this is a bad Bengals defense, I'm still looking at Quinn Ewers with absolutely no trust. And if I don't have to be scared of anything that Quinn Ewers is going to do, it only gets easier to shut down Achane. So for all of us that thought we did everything the right way, congratulations for the lump of coal that suddenly the Dolphins and Chiefs are going to leave in your stocking right around Christmas time. Speaking of stocking stuffers, let's get to some of those fantasy stocking stuffers. Last-minute pickups that are out there this week that you can add to your team. Matt Harmon, what do you got for me?
Yeah, I'm looking at the quarterback position. I'm looking at CJ Stroud here for a couple different reasons. One, good matchup. Fits against a bad Raiders defense. That's a little payback for Chris there on that one. But
Thank you.
Listen, that's part of it. The other part of it is I think this Texans offense has figured itself out to some degree here. I think the offensive line is no longer the absolute worst in the NFL. They've made some personnel changes that have improved the situation, which has obviously allowed for CJ Stroud to have more time back there. And I also think he's getting the ball out quick. He's hitting his number one read in Nico Collins. They've sort of altered his route tree a little bit to get him some quicker hitting passes, more rhythm throws. Those two guys are in sync right now. Stroud has just been really good since coming back from the missed games with the concussion. I think you can trust him in this matchup to be a replacement if you've got a quarterback in a tough spot. I've got a Justin Herbert team where I've weighed Stroud and him all throughout the week. I'll probably doing it on this show right up until kickoff. So I think if you need help at quarterback, Stroud is a really good streamer this week against the Raiders.
Yeah, we had Jason McCourty on this week on Yahoo Sports Daily, who's calling that game on TV. And his advice to me on air was just to simply not watch it and never look at the score. So I think you're right. Could be a good one. Chris, what do you got for us as a fantasy stocking stuff?
We did the 80 Mitchell thing a couple of weeks ago, and that worked out, right? We'll have to check with Dan and the rest of the guys behind the scenes. Hopefully they erased all of that tape. But anyway, there is a bit of logic to trying to go with Adonai Mitchell for this week. First off, it's kind of funny and sad that Mitchell has only played 5 games for the Jets, and he's had to play with 3 different quarterbacks so far. It's kind of shock and looking at what he's had to deal with. But on the bright side, he's been the wide receiver one independent of who's been under center. He had a 23.1% target rate with Justin Fields. And it's been up to 27.8% and 28.1% with Tyrod Taylor and Brady Cook. Now, this week, he's indoors against the Saints defense that's been top 10 in completion percentage allowed and passing success rate allowed to wide receivers over their last 6 games. And they're also with a bottom 10 pass rush. So if I told you I knew a guy that had near a 30% target share and 50% of his team's air yards and playing a defense like the Saints, you'd get excited. But then after I tell you it's 80 Mitchell and Brady Cook, I can definitely understand the skepticism, especially in week 16. But at least there is some upside to Mitchell for Sunday.
Brady Cook, good God, this season has gone off the rails. Boone, what do you got for us?
I'm going with Jalen Coker, and I know Harmon loves this guy too. We've talked about him on the fantasy forecast. He doesn't want me to mention his name in the same sentence as J.J. McCarthy, but I think you will be fine that I'm mentioning him alongside Jalen Coker here because this guy has been coming on for a little while now. Over his last 4 games, over 50 yards in 3 of them. He's somebody that if you go back to last year, I've mentioned the stat that if you take away his first game where he didn't play very much, you take his stats on a per game basis, you average it out over a full year. He had a chance to go over 800 yards last year, and you're playing with stats a little bit on that one, but it just shows you the potential that this guy has to be the number 2 pass catcher in this offense. They don't have much at tight end. Xavier Legette has not emerged as that guy. Coker can be that player. And Tetairoa McMillan's playing through some injuries right now. He's going to be out there today, but he has missed some practice. He's dealing with something, so maybe hitting a bit of a rookie wall as well. And Coker's starting to come on. And the matchup this week in a must-win game against the Buccaneers, they got a banged-up secondary, not exactly a scary matchup for him at all. So Coker's a guy that is much more available than the other two names that we mentioned here, who people could go out, pick up today, and slot into your lineup as a wide receiver 4 flex with some upside.
All right, guys, let's get to the chat. I know everybody is desperate right now. They're in their playoff matchups. Decided to check the chat. All right, we'll get the first question in. Coming from Tongshanks28. Says, pick 3 in full PPR. Ladd versus Dallas. Jacoby versus Denver. T. Higgins versus Miami. Kenny Gainwell versus Detroit. So, Harmon, what do you think?
I was hoping this wasn't coming to me. I feel like the guy that I trust the least here. I think all these guys are good plays this week, including Kenny Gainwell. I've mentioned this on the show often, but he's just getting targeted at an absurd rate, especially in a full PPR. I feel like he gives you some level of security there. I would chase those receptions with him. T. Higgins, I think, has to be in your lineup in a good matchup with Joe Burrow back there. And then it's kind of between Ladd and Jacoby Myers, and I feel as if Jacoby Myers is the one who, like, why is Vance Joseph just not going to shadow Pat Surtain with Jacoby Myers, considering how important he has been? Maybe it ends up being BTJ, but I think I would chase Ladd in the really good matchup over Jacoby Myers for that final spot.
Next question in the chat comes from The Place To Be. Not really sure why we spelled two that way, but still, The Place To Be. What's up, all you amazing and beautiful people? Never mind, I take it back. The spelling's perfect. Would you start J.J. McCarthy over Bryce Young? Chris, what do you think?
I can understand it, starting J.J. McCarthy over Bryce Young. These past couple of weeks, we've seen him be a bit more comfortable behind the line of scrimmage, getting the ball out on time. Not to Justin Jefferson. It's been to pretty much everybody else except for Jefferson. But still, going up against a giant secondary that we know is missing a number of key defenders. Whereas for Bryce Young, we do know that the Bucs pass rush can put a number of quarterbacks under duress. So I can understand going over Bryce Young by using J.J. McCarthy in this matchup.
All right, we'll get the next question. Obviously, he's going to have to go to Santa because they used a Santa emoji in it. Des caught it for sure. Comes in, good morning, crew, and happy holidays. Pickens, J-Mo, Michael Carter, Marks, Harvey, Dowdle, start 3. The world's your oyster, Santa Claus. What say you?
I am going with Jameson Williams, who I have as a top 7 receiver this week. He's been playing great. I think this is another positive matchup. Michael Carter, who I think is going to have a good game, who I talked about off the top. And then it gets a little tight, but I'm going to go with Harvey, who's really emerging as the lead back in Denver right now.
All right, we'll get one more question here from Spruce Bluffer. And Spruce Bluffer, which is just fun to say, Kelsey, Waller, or Johnson in a tight end 1.5 PPR, because things need to be complicated. Harmon, what do you got?
Oh, man, I really don't want to play Travis Kelsey with Gardner Minshew, although he's kind of the only option. And I feel as if he comes out of this with a lot of catches in this one. So I'm probably going to go with Kelsey, even though the Waller matchup is really intriguing. And Juwan Johnson, I also think, could be heavily targeted without Devon Bailey.
All right, it's time for our first break here on Fantasy Football Live. But when we come back, we're going to figure out feasting. Oh, everybody wants a feast. We'll figure out what players are I'll learn how to talk. Are prepared to have a feast this weekend. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live right here on Yahoo Sports, Yahoo Fantasy YouTube, and the Yahoo Sports Network. Of course, it's Fantasy Feast in the cozy confines of Ford Field. Good Lord. 7-point favorite for the Lions in this game against the Steelers. Let's get into this matchup and what we've got our eyes on. Chris Allen, what are you looking for in this Fantasy Feast?
I know some folks might be somewhat concerned about Jahmyr Gibbs, but I don't see why everybody has a little bit of anxiety about it, because as Ian Harnitz pointed out on X last week, it's just every other week for Jahmyr Gibbs. That's really how you have to approach starting Gibbs, because going back to week 6, the Lions RB1 has oscillated from RB25 to RB2 with almost no in between. But to be fair, there's no in between regarding how he's picking up yards. And I know, and I'll use Harmon's voice here, like, you can't take away a player's best runs, but honestly, when you do, it at least helps contextualize some of what's going on with Detroit's running game, because since their bye, Gibbs has 874 scrimmage yards since their bye. 477 of those yards, or 54.6%, have come on explosive plays. In other words, around 10% of his touches speaks for over half of his production. But part of the issue is where we see Gibbs on early downs. Compared to last year, he's taken a step back in terms of rushing success rate. I mean, and also while he's leading the team in adjusted yards after contact per carry, that's where we've seen a lot of David Montgomery starting to mix in. And also the other piece to that is the Lions offensive line. I mean, the center, Graham Glasgow, who's already missed a game, he's in danger of missing this contest. Penei Sewell, we've seen shots of him sitting over on the bench, missing a couple of snaps here and there. So instead of this unit being average to above average in years past, this is more of a, I would say, bottom 10, bottom 12 type unit from a run blocking perspective. But at least for Gibbs, on the plus side, he still maintained a 60% share of the rushing carries over Montgomery. And of course, especially since Sam Laporta has been out with the back injury, averaging around 7 targets per game. And Pittsburgh, they're dealing with their own problems on defense. Nick Herbig is supposed to be out for this game. TJ Watt is trending towards being out in this game as well. And the Steelers have already given up multiple top 12 performances to opposing running backs. 4 of their last 7 had wound up with an RB1 on the week from those running backs. So between the chance for Gibbs to break off a long run or a long pass from Jared Goff, or, I mean, also the environment that we have to consider for Jahmyr Gibbs, it's at least set up for him to continue that every other week stretch that we've seen from Gibbs so far this season.
All right, Harmon, let's get your thoughts on your Fantasy Feast and also on, Chris Allen's Harmon impression. I thought it was pretty good. So pretty spot on.
I thought I was like, oh my God, have I been cloned? That is exactly what I would have said. And I think you can always do that with this next player that I'm going to talk about here too. Jameson Williams, well, if you took away the explosive plays, I mean, is he really even any good? Well, that's what he does. He makes explosive plays, and he has been making a lot of them lately. And I think people need to lean into the volatility of this player because there certainly is some volatility with him. I mean, in the first 9 weeks of the season, Jameson Williams averaged 4.5 targets and 2.6 receptions per game, despite coming off this great 2024 breakout season. Painfully slow start, but ever since weeks 10 to 15, he has been one of the most productive receivers in the NFL. 96.8 yards per game, 6th most among all wide receivers. And that was despite having a 0-catch game in week 12. Like, that happened not that long ago, and we just all kind of memory hold it because otherwise he's been about as good as you could possibly be. And look, Dan Campbell took over the play calling in week 10. I think that has certainly helped, but also Sam Laporta being out of this lineup. I know it's a boring answer that people don't want to consider. That has been huge for Jameson Williams. Since week 10, no Lions tight end or wide receiver outside of Williams at 22.8% or Amon-Ra St. Brown at 30.2% has a target share higher than 6%. When things are consolidated between these two guys in the passing game, that erases some of the up and down concerns with Williams' game. He's used so well in this Lions offense. While the Steelers' secondary is better now than it was to start the year, I'm still comfortable rolling Jameson Williams out there because there's just no way I could leave the potential high ceiling game on my bench and feel good if he had one of those eruption spots.
All right, Santa Boone, what do you have on your mind for a Fantasy Feast?
I'm going to a receiver on the other side of the field, DK Metcalf. He is about to go off in this game, and he's put a couple good performances together lately. 7 catches for 148 yards in week 14, 55 and a touchdown in week 15. This matchup with the Lions, it's going to vault them to another really strong stat line here. Their defense has given up the 2nd most fantasy points to wideouts. This game projects to be a shootout, 52.5 projected points, highest on the slate last I checked. And Metcalf has also had a lot of success at Ford Field. I mean, he wasn't a member of the Steelers at the time, but over his last 3 seasons, he has played them each of the last 3 years in Detroit, 104 yards, 75 yards, and 149 yards. What is stopping him from having another great game here? They're banged up in the secondary. They're going to have to open it up as well. I know the Steelers don't want to, but this is the kind of game where Aaron Rodgers is going to have to throw the ball around a little more. That leads to Metcalf having a decent game here. I really like him as like a borderline wide receiver 1 for fantasy this week. I think it's going to be a boom week for sure.
All right, gentlemen, it is time to check in on our playoff heroes. Last week, we selected our fantasy playoff heroes. Let's take a look at who we're monitoring, and we're going to start with Boone. So, Boone, is it still wheels up on Brock Purdy for you?
I mean, so far so good, right? 295 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 44 rushing yards last week. Helped a lot of people move through and advance to the next round of the playoffs. And I think he's got a good shot this week to have another great game. Going up against a Colts defense, it's sort of like a middle-of-the-pack matchup on paper, but Javarius Ward's on IR, Sauce Gardner's banged up, so they're not exactly at the peak of their powers. So, yeah, for Purdy and for this 49ers offense, I see him as a strong QB1 for fantasy this week, and I would be going out of my way not to just to play him, but to play CMC and Kittle and Juwan Jennings. You want pieces of the 49ers, and that's what we've been saying for a few weeks now.
All right, Chris, you're up next. Let's check in on these playoff heroes. Devin Neal out now. Would you replace it with the New Orleans back, or would you go with somebody else?
I think Boone laid it out pretty well earlier. I'm looking somewhere else, at least trying to stash either of those 2 running backs and seeing what we get out of week 16, because I'd advocate for picking up either of Audric Estime or Evan Hall, but again, I'm a little bit skeptical about starting either of those guys, because at least on vibes, I know most folks are looking towards Audric Estime, but again, I get that he outsnapped Evan Hall 24-19. We saw a bit more out of him from a target share standpoint, and at 225 pounds or so, he profiles as that type of RB1 that could take on a lot of that workload, that short yardage type of stuff. But all I'll say is Hall had more carries than Estime after Devin Neal left the game. I mean, granted, the Saints only ran the ball 9 times, and that was with Shuck also contributing on the ground. But still, it was a shift from early in the game when Estime was still working in behind Devin Neal when he was still healthy. And also this receiving role for Estime that consisted of 2 targets that were well behind the line of scrimmage. It's not like he was the reincarnation of Alvin Kamara or anything like that. Whereas it's been a few years, but Evan Hall, he actually earned 118 targets over his final 2 years at Northwestern. Audric Estime, 25 while he was still back in college. So all I'm saying, we're trying to extrapolate data from essentially 1/2 of a game, whereas I mean, again, going up against this Jets defense, if you looked at how the Jets wound up beating how the Jags wound up beating the Jets on the ground, it was using the running backs as receivers. And with Evan Hall really is profiling as the better receiver out of those 2, I would rather at least let's see what we have for this week, and then maybe see what the running back rotations look like in week 17 when the Saints face the Titans instead.
All right, Harmon, let's check in on this list again. By the way, it's amazing how happy some of these guys look in Christmas sweaters and how unhappy they look. RJ Harvey looks like he's ready to just absolutely murder somebody in that Christmas sweater. Let's figure this out. How do you feel about RJ Harvey against the top-ranked Jags run defense?
I think RJ should feel a little bit better, but he looks great in that sweater, man. And yeah, obviously from a matchup perspective, it's not ideal against that great Jaguars run defense. That Jags defense has just been one of the best surprises of the season. But the reality is, I think it's tough to get away from Harvey in this matchup. He's a running back 1 from both an expected and fantasy points per game standpoint since he took over this backfield in week 11. I mean, he has 100% of the touches inside the 2-yard line since week 13, since they came back from the bye. He's getting usage in the passing game. He's the clear lead back from a base down perspective, and he's got goal line work. And this offense, you mentioned it earlier, Fitz, Bo's playing well. They are definitely trending in the right direction as the season comes to a close here. So I understand the matchup is tough, but to me, RJ Harvey is a green light start here in week 16, week 17, as long as he remains the lead back for this team.
All right, Justin Boone, it is time for you and I to get to some breaking ranks. This is where I take the sleigh with my red nose and I take Santa right to the chimney. We figure out who we're letting take up here. So, Boone, take it away. Who's breaking ranks for you?
All right, the first guy I want to talk about is Drake London, who now we know is going to play today. He is up to wide receiver 13. A little surprising, though, because he's coming back from a PCL injury. He went limited DNP in practice this week, and when I saw that DNP on Friday, I almost started preparing for him not to be out there, but Schefter, Rappaport, they're reporting he is expected to play today, and I have him a bit lower than usual. I mean, if we knew that he was 100% healthy, this is Drake London. We saw what he did earlier in the season, the kind of volume that he commands. He would be up in like top 5 or 6 probably for wide receivers this week. I have him at wide receiver 13. I'm playing it a little more cautious because we've seen some other guys come back from PCL injuries and not really be the same in their first game or two back. So that I'm a little bit worried about, on top of the fact that Kyle Pitts has been fantastic with him out. And I do think that they are going to continue to use Pitts a little bit more now. Maybe they realize they have another weapon they can trust, because Darnell Mooney has done nothing this year, but Pitts could do something. They saw it. They're going to continue to use him. So I'm just pushing London down a little bit. It's a risky play. There's an injury involved. There could always be an aggravation, but I would play him as a wide receiver 2 this week. I'd expect like 70, 80% of his normal stats. That's why we got him there. The next one is the one that everybody wants to talk about. Michael Wilson. Where do we put him? Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to play this week. So now we don't have those games like we had where Michael Wilson was going off as basically a top 5 fantasy receiver. Now we have to figure out what to do with him. But here's the thing. Harrison is not 100%. By the way the team has talked, everything going right now, the coaching staff talked about him needing to get back up to speed, get his breath back out there. Harrison also, and I'm reading between the tea leaves here, and this is probably like a mistake, a speculation for sure. I want to make that clear. But when he got asked by reporters, he really didn't seem that happy. And he's a bit of a guy like that doesn't really show a ton of emotion, just like his dad. But when he was asked this week, he said he feels like he's ready to go, but he didn't seem excited to be returning to the lineup at all. And I wonder if that's because in practice this week, Michael Wilson was actually leading the wide receiver drills. And if he's not 100%, maybe they don't rush him back like they did last time when he got hurt again. Maybe they do use him in more of a complimentary second receiver role. Of course, they have Trey McBride as well there, who's going to take targets. So I'm looking at Wilson this week still as a very risky wide receiver 2 for fantasy. I'm going to be playing him in a bunch of spots, but man, it is volatile and it does not feel good to be trusting him now that Marvin Harrison Jr. is back. And for Harrison, if you want to get him in your lineup, he is a very just wide receiver 3. The last guy we're going to talk about here is the guy that Harmon brought up a second ago, Travis Kelce. I've moved him all the way up to tight end 6. At the beginning of the week, I did not feel good about the game. Super low total, 37.5 projected points. Obviously, we know Patrick Mahomes isn't out there this week, but also Rashee Rice is not out there. They have to throw the ball to somebody. And I've come around to this idea. Scott Pianowski brought this up on the Monday show, that it's possible we could see like a Kobe Bryant type situation here, where at the end of Kobe's career, they just let him go off. The team wasn't playing for anything. Just give him a ton of volume. Let's have fun with this. I think it could be something similar for Kelce, in part because they just have no choice. Do you really trust Xavier Worthy getting that much work? Juju Smith-Schuster, like who else are they going to? So we know how tight end can be for fantasy. I think Kelce's going to get the volume. He has moved up to that mid-range tight end 1 area for me this week, and I think you could put him in your lineup with some confidence.
All right, we're just getting started.
Are
We
you
got
still
plenty
with
more to
me,
break
Fitz?
down coming
Did
up
we
in
lose
week
Fitz
16.
here? Are we frozen?
We will get you more insights on what you need coming up next on Fantasy Football Live. Welcome back to the holiday sweater edition of Fantasy Football Live here on Yahoo Sports. I'm Jason Fitz, sitting with Matt Harmon, Chris Allen, Justin Boone. We're going to be with you all the way up to 1 p.m., all the way up to kickoff. You guys can get involved in the conversation with hashtag AskFFL. And if this isn't enough Christmas cheer for you, we also have our very own Scott Pianowski out on Twitter X, making sure that he's getting your questions answered. I can neither confirm nor deny what Christmas sweater he would be wearing right now, but in my imagination, it is full Santa. Like, I think he's full Santa in the throne. Like, he's got like a cup of cocoa. He's got the full beard, which he's grown himself. Like, he wanted to be full in. He's got the full beard. He's Mall Santa. Scott Pianowski is your Mall Santa. That's what we all need. 3 games in the book. So, want to take a quick look at the top fantasy performers so far as we pull up the board. I don't know if you guys happen to see this. A guy named Puka Nacua. I don't know if 12 catches, 225 yards. 2 touchdowns, 40.5 points, absolute beast mode. Kenneth Walker, though, not to be outdone, 23.9 fantasy points, which technically means he was outdone, but either way. Saquon Barkley, 21.2 points in this. And then the other side of this is a little bit of disappointment for some people, because some of you went into this matchup feeling pretty frisky about some of who you had. But on the other side of this, we did have some disappointment. Jaden Reed, 5.6 points. Terry McLaurin, 6.8 points. DeAndre Swift, 8 points. I know a lot of you guys had Josh Jacobs. I just say it didn't necessarily go perfectly for you. All right, let's get to what will go perfectly. Lock it in. We're going to get to matchup-proof players. I don't care what the matchup looks like. This guy is going to absolutely thrive. So, Matt Harmon, give me your locked-in matchup-proof player this week.
I'm not promising this is going to go perfectly, so that's you selling it, not me.
No,
but I do
think
think
that's my job.
Travis Etienne is not a person. Travis Etienne is not a person that can be on your bench, and it is a tough matchup. The Broncos' run defense is good. They also allow the fewest catches to running backs on the season at just 38, and yet I do think that Denver has some issues at the linebacker position. They've got good players, but they've got some aggressive players there too. And Liam Cohen throws a lot of eye candy out there, a lot of motion pre-snap, kind of disguises where one player's going this way and then Travis Etienne is free running down the field for some downfield catches there. And that was what we saw last week. 100% totally different beast when we're talking about the Jets defense, especially in the front seven versus the Broncos. And yet I do think this Jaguars offense at a point right now, you just trust the lead back here. And Etienne is clearly the lead back. Bashal Tutin is injured. Etienne is the guy. He was not facing any challenges from Bashal Tutin before that fact. So I think that he is, maybe not a top 5 guy like he was last week, but I certainly think he is still a fringe running back 1, bare minimum, high-end running back 2, somebody you got to play in this week. And I may or may not be saying that because I have him on 2 teams going today, so I better be right on this.
Well, the Grinch tried to downplay my sales pitch on this, so let's go to Santa Claus next. Boone, give it to me. Locked in, matchup proof. You're throwing this under the tree, and you know it's going to be the best Christmas present anybody's ever had in their life. Who is it?
I mean, it has to be Jacoby Brissett. Like last week, we were talking about this guy going, okay, finally, he's going against the Texans defense. This string of him being a fantasy QB1 in every start he's had with the Cardinals, it's about to come to an end. It didn't. This is now 9 straight starts where he has been a top 12 fantasy quarterback. And this week, he gets an easier date with the Falcons in a game that's tied for the 3rd highest projected point total on the week at 48.5. He's getting Marvin Harrison Jr. back, even though it might not be 100% of Marvin Harrison Jr. That's another weapon to work with because they don't have a ton of depth in that receiving core. So I just want to give him props here because he came through in that very tough matchup last week. There is no reason to doubt him now. You start him as a fantasy QB1, especially in the semifinals.
Well, Chris Allen, you have the unenviable job of following Santa Claus. Nobody wants to come down the chimney right after the fat man. But we'll give you the opportunity. What do you got for us as a matchup-proof player?
Well, I'll follow Santa Claus in recommending a pass catcher from a quarterback he'd already talked about, Brock Purdy's wide receiver 1, Juwan Jennings. And yes, Jennings' target share was down to about 18% against the Titans, but Jennings, he hoarded 75% of the end zone passing attempts with a couple of those targets turning into touchdowns. And he's still tied for the team lead in obvious passing situations. But that was last week. And on Monday night, the 49ers, they'll be without Ricky Pearsall. In the 6 games we saw the 49ers without Pearsall early in the season, Jennings' target rate was up to 22%, with nearly a third of his attempts and most of these coming from Mac Jones coming from the slot. So at worst, Pearsall's absence lends itself to Jennings getting some more of those layup targets, because over half of his looks early in the seasons were on slants, in breakers, allowing him to have a few more yards after the catch. So now with Purdy having that offense humming coming out of the bye, Jennings should be at worst a top 24 option for week 16.
All right, let's, gentlemen, get to some fantasy face-off. This is where we figure out who gets to be head elf. All right, so the leader in the clubhouse right now is Audric Estime. So we're going to figure out Guy versus Audric Estime. Chris Allen, we'll start with you. Kareem Hunt versus Audric Estime for head elf. Who you got?
If my thoughts on the Saints backfield earlier was any indication, I'm just not 100% sold on Estime's potential role, whereas we do know the contextualized usage for Kareem Hunt. So it's close, but I do lean Hunt here, because even with Isaiah Pacheco back, Hunt still handled 53% of the carries, and most importantly, 2/3 of the goal line attempts. And it's not just the workload, but also the potential for touchdown equity. I mean, if we're trying to gauge whether or not either of those two are going to fall into the end zone, I mean, the Chiefs' path might be easier, because through injury attrition, the Titans secondary, they've allowed 264 passing yards per game since they're buying. That's the fourth most in the league, essentially allowing other teams to live in their red zone. I mean, 13 touchdowns allowed so far over the past 5 or 6 games. That's a fourth most in the entire league, with 4 of those coming on the ground. And that's after the Titans have faced quarterbacks like Davis Mills, Shador Sanders, on top of the Sam Darnolds and Trevor Lawrences of the world. So I doubt Kansas City is completely just going to become a shell of themselves because Patrick Mahomes is out for the rest of the season. So I'll take Hunt's outlook over Estime's just for this week, though.
Estime's sad. He then goes to the Grinch and he says, Grinch, what about me? So I'll give you, Matt Harmon, the choice between Estime or Kamani Vidal. Who do you have as the head elf?
Yeah, I like Chris Allen. I'm not 100% convinced that Estime is the lead back, but I feel pretty good about it. I also will admit that in a disgustingly deep league in which I did make some Thursday night mistakes, I actually have to play Audric Estime, so I need him to be the head elf, Fitzy. I'll tell you that. I would certainly play him over Kamani Vidal, though. I think Vidal is still a member of that Chargers backfield, of course, but he mostly is playing as many snaps as he is because he is trusted in pass protection. Rookie Amarian Hampton is not right now, and that is key because the Chargers offensive line has completely fallen apart. So Vidal is going to kind of skew the running back usage in the backfield where he's playing a lot of snaps, but again, it's mostly for protection. Amarian Hampton is still getting the goal line work. He's still getting more intentional pass catching usage. So I just think Vidal is a guy that is pretty low on the flex radar at this point, where at least with Audric Estime, you can chase a touchdown in a Saints offense that is playing pretty well right now. Like, people don't want to talk about Tyler Shuck, but he is playing some pretty good football down there in New Orleans right now.
You are right. The Shuck thing is we're gonna have to pay attention. It's gonna be an off-season conversation. All right, the last call on this always goes to the fat man in the red hat. So Santa Claus gets to decide last. This one we're going to give you Audric Estime versus Tyler Algier. Who is going to be Santa's head elf? I can't believe I'm calling men this size elf, but it works.
I mean, if you're looking at Tyler Algier for fantasy at this point, it's basically like a touchdown or bust to RB3 flex play. And I share the same concerns everyone else has with Estime, that like we're not 100% sure that he's going to get the most work. But last week, he did get more work. A lot of his production came through the air, but for this, it just comes down to the matchup for me. And I mentioned off the top of the show, Jets giving up the second most fantasy points to running backs, but even more, a mind-boggling 14 total touchdowns to running backs in their last 5 games. 14 touchdowns to running backs in their last 5 games. So I am more than willing to take a shot on Estime scoring a touchdown against them. I think the odds of that happening are a little bit better than Tyler Algier finding the end zone this week.
All right, gentlemen, let's help everybody out with some picks. Let's get to make your pick. We'll go through some questions that are being submitted and figure out what our experts think. And the first question comes from Sledge FF, who says, pick 2 PPR, RJ Harvey, Henderson, Jennings, or Hampton, hashtag make your pick. What do you say, Harmon?
Oh, man, this is a great one. Love when you got some good options. That's what's going to happen when you're playing here in Week 16. I think I'm going to give the Travion Henderson, RJ Harvey debate is pretty tough for me. I think I'm going to go RJ Harvey, though. Just trust that he's getting more usage in that backfield. And the second one, I think you got to play Jawan Jennings this week in a really good matchup against the Indianapolis secondary that's very banged up.
All right, the next one comes in from Perm. Perm says, thanks for all the help this season. Well, you're welcome, Perm. But the question is quarterback, Dak or Lamar for flex, sit one. Pickens, Jones, Travis Etienne, standard scoring, make your pick. Chris Allen, what say you?
All right, so for the quarterbacks of having to pick between Dak Prescott and Lamar, and I think Harmon laid out the coverage for that Dak is going to be facing. The Chargers have played pretty sound defense, so I prefer Lamar Jackson between those two quarterbacks. Jackson looked pretty much at the healthiest we've seen from him over these past 3 to 4 games against the Bengals, not just from a passing standpoint, but scrambling as well. So I like Lamar from a quarterback standpoint. And then out of the 3 players there, Pickens, Aaron Jones, or Travis Etienne. I mean, I'd also like Travis Etienne from this matchup. While the Denver Broncos stout run defense, but how well Etienne was able to get those manufactured touches from a receiving standpoint, I do think that he has the better outlook. Whereas for Aaron Jones, yes, he's going up against the Giants run defense, which also has been fairly tough, but it's also in a matchup where we could see the Vikings get up well ahead of the Giants, and it's more of Jordan Mason than Aaron Jones once we get into the second half. So workload concerns for Aaron Jones where I don't have those with Travis Etienne, so I lean in his direction.
All right, the next one comes from James. James says half PPR. RJ Harvey, Aaron Jones, Zay Flowers, Mike Evans, make your pick. What do you think, Boone?
I'm rolling with RJ Harvey. I think he's just been really, really good, and I don't know how you could sit him. I don't know how Harmon sat Travion Henderson in that other question either. It's just the rookie running backs are coming on strong down the stretch, and I want them in my lineup.
That one was simple. All right, Davin Guest, we'll get one more in here. Davin Guest comes in, full PPR, just pick one. Hunt versus the Titans, AD Mitchell versus the Saints, Coker versus the Bucks, Hull versus the Jets, and DK versus the Chiefs. Harmon, what do you think?
Tight call here between AD Mitchell and Jalen Coker. For me, oh man, I really don't want to pick against Jalen Coker. I really don't want you guys to make me. But I got Mitchell a few spots higher in the ranks, man. The reality is here, he's clearly the top target in that backfield. I mean, in that wide receiver room. I think you got to go with him, slight edge over Jalen Coker, who I also do really like.
They gave Coker the best sweater, though. There's no doubt about that. Coker gets the advantage of the best sweater. All right, this is when we get to say goodbye to Boone. He's got to spend the last moments in the rankings bunker. He's got to make sure everybody gets the presents. He's got to go deliver it. He's got work to do. You can keep checking in on updated rankings in the Yahoo Fantasy app. He is the best in the business. We're going to keep going, though, while the Grinch and Santa both simultaneously leave. It's a delight. Coming up next, though, we got to take a quick break. It's that holiday time. We've got Santas and Grinches. Who will bring gifts and who will steal away our fantasy hopes this week? We'll get into it next. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Live on Yahoo Sports. What a massive, massive game we have on Sunday Night Football. Patriots taking on the Ravens. This is one of the elite matchups with so much on the line for the Patriots in playoff positioning and the Ravens fighting for their playoff lives. 8:20 p.m. Eastern in Baltimore. Ravens favored by 3. That's right, the Ravens favored over the 11-3 Patriots by 3. So what are you looking for here? What is a storyline that you've got your eyes on, Chris Allen?
For this one, it's can we trust Zay Flowers? And I think from a fantasy standpoint, I don't think we give Flowers enough credit. I mean, I know that I don't, because every time that he plays the Bengals, I'm hoping that he underperforms and he just winds up going for a touchdown anyway. But despite him being undersized, he mostly runs a full route tree. The gadgety parts to his game from his rookie season are gone, and the opportunity and efficiency have remained. He's 7th in yards per route run right now. Week 3 was the only game under 20% of the targets. He has a larger share of his team's air yards than Puka Nacua does. But last week, we saw something from Lamar and Zay that we hadn't seen since the season opener, and that was end zone targets. He had 1 in the season opener, didn't get another until weeks 14 and 15, and like I said beforehand, of course, he converted one of those for a score against Cincinnati. So I'm not worried about Flowers getting targets or even producing against the Patriots, even if you split up his efficiency from a yards per route run standpoint by coverage. I mean, he's top 20 against man, he's top 20 against zone. I mean, he can still be efficient regardless of what defensive concepts that Mike Vrabel and the rest of the squad are going to throw at him. But we need to see less of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, and I mean, honestly, even though I know this is going to hurt Harmon a bit, less of Rashad Bateman once they get into the end zone, because that's where we can actually see Flowers pop off for some more of those games. And so over the last 6 games, the Patriots, they have given up 9 receiving touchdowns, which is the 3rd most of any defense during that stretch. So if Flowers can swap out some of those empty calorie targets for those money touches, I think he'll be back into the wide receiver 2 conversation for week 16.
That's a good call by you. I've got my eye on the running back splits on this for the Ravens, because Derrick Henry, I mean, if you look back at October, for a 6-week span, Derrick Henry averaged around 20 carries a game. Everything was fine. But once we hit mid-November, all of that started to change, and it became very inconsistent. In fact, if you look over the last few weeks, 21 carries followed by 10 carries. 25 carries followed last week by 11 carries. Yes, it was 100 yards, and we're going to make a lot about that. But we're not talking about a lot of touches. And over the last 2 weeks, we've seen a rise in touches for Keaton Mitchell. I'm starting to wonder if we're actually seeing a change in the running back splits for the Ravens that means something moving forward. Yes, this is Derrick Henry that we're talking about, and we just presumed that he would never fall off the cliff, and I'm not saying he has, but certainly he's not the explosive back he was last year, and Keaton Mitchell is carving out more of a role. Now you've got this Derrick Henry versus Mike Vrabel matchup you're going to hear a lot about in the broadcast, but sometimes I think there's accuracy to that. These two men know each other incredibly well, and frankly, Vrabel knows exactly what to do to key on Henry as a runner. So I wonder if we're going to see more of Keaton Mitchell going down the stretch, which is going to make everybody in their playoff matchups so wildly nervous. You should be nervous if Derrick Henry is your bell cow going into this, obviously. Harmon, what do you have your eyes on for a storyline in this game?
I think I'm finally ready to give up hopes that Stephon Diggs is ever going to become a full-time player for the New England Patriots. That's not to say that he's not a good player for the Patriots. He's not a player that is helping this team. He pretty clearly is. However, from a fantasy football standpoint, we need him to be on the field a lot more than he is to be somebody you can trust in your lineup. And, you know, back in week 11, he ran a season-high 89% route participation. The 2 games after that, he's below 30 yards receiving. He runs a route on 54 and then 61% of the dropbacks. And you think, okay, they're going on this late week 14 bye. Now is the time they're really going to unleash this 32-year-old wide receiver coming off the ACL, who's, again, pretty clearly their best wide receiver in the room. That wasn't the case either. He ran around on 55% of the dropbacks. He turned in 26 yards receiving. So I'm just saying I'm giving up trying to guess like when this is going to happen. I haven't been able to get it right. I don't think that we can know when or if this is going to happen. Like, again, maybe in this game against the Ravens, it's like that week 11 game against the Jets. It's like week 4 against the Carolina Panthers, which funny we're talking about those level of teams versus like some of the bigger games on the season. He runs around on 80% of the dropbacks. Maybe it happens, but you're not going to know going into it, and that makes him a pretty difficult player to trust in fantasy.
Gentlemen, in the spirit of the season, let's get to Fantasy Santas and Grinches. Who's going to make everything better, and who's going to try and steal Christmas for you for Week 16? All right, Matt Harmon, let's start with the Santas. Let's start with Polly Positive. Give me a Santa Claus that you think is going to make everybody's Christmas season better this weekend.
Yeah, it's Chris Olave, New Orleans Saints wide receiver. Number one, because he's been getting usage all season long. He is top 5 in the NFL in targets at the position. He's been getting a ton of looks in that offense. And quite frankly, he's been doing more with them than people think. He's a top 10 wide receiver in yards this season. He has been a very useful fantasy football wide receiver, top 15 in points per game at the position. And I think his connection with Tyler Shuck has really turned positive these last few weeks. And Olave is a guy that has made mistakes this year. He's had some drops. He's had some mistracked balls at the catch point, just ones that he should have brought in. His season could be even better than it is on paper. But again, I like what he's showing with Tyler Shuck. Those passes that those guys hit on just in-breaker at the end of the game against the Carolina Panthers. Shuck has impressed me more there and just generally he's impressed me more, but certainly on those throws over the middle of the field, standing in the pocket, just facing down pressure. He's been better than I would have expected this season. So I like the way these two guys are playing right now. I expect Chris Olave to have another solid game, solid to maybe potentially big game here in week 16 and week 17.
You want to give me a Santa ho, ho, ho. I'm just giving you the opportunity in case you had like a ho, ho, ho in your belly you wanted to get out. No, he doesn't.
Ho, ho. I don't know.
I knew it. That's the Grinchiest. Yep. That's the most on-brand Harmon ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho.
All right, Chris Allen, we'll let you take over the ho, ho, ho's. Give me your Santa for fantasy this weekend.
So I'll go with Mike Evans, wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I talked about Baker Mayfield in the earlier segment, and I had to give his wide receiver one some love there because Evans coming back from his collarbone injury, he walked right into 12 targets in that primetime game. And it wasn't just that he reclaimed the wide receiver one role over Emeka Egbuka, Chris Godwin, and those guys, but how he was winning on the field. 5 of his 6 receptions came on intermediate timing concepts or go routes. It was vintage Mike Evans that we were seeing out there on the field 2 Thursdays ago. And coincidentally, that's how a few other wide receivers have beat the Panthers. Chris Olave, that Harmon was just talking about, he smoked them at 14.3 air yards per clip on posts or out routes. Both Rams wide receivers, Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, hit explosive catches against them. And even Michael Penix, when he was still active, him and Drake London, they were spamming, a lot of those in-breakers when they played against them back in, I think it was week 11. So I still have some general concerns about Baker Mayfield, the accuracy, completion percentage, all of that is still a part of how he plays and his aggressive nature. But as long as he's still slinging it to Mike Evans, Evans still should be in the wide receiver one conversation for the semifinals.
All right, Harmon, let's get to your sweater right now. Give us your Grinch. Who's a Grinch this weekend?
Yeah, look, I hate to pile on further to this Raiders offense, but man, it certainly deserves it. And Ashton Genty is a guy that I've got ranked so low this week that it kind of hurts for a guy in Genty who I think is good. I don't think Genty is bad. I think there's some hope for him going forward, but the problem is there's almost no hope for him here in week 16 against the Texans defense that should dominate this Raiders offense, especially along the offensive line. If the Raiders score 0 points today, I won't be surprised. So if you have to play Ashton Genty in your fantasy football semifinal matchup, congratulations that you made it this far with him. It is possible. I'm actually facing a team that has Ashton Genty this week, so it is certainly possible. You can manage around it, but the reality is right now you've got to count on just the scammiest of scam targets. You kind of count on that, and last week he got 6 targets. He got 4 passes for 7 yards, 1 first down last week, and I think we could see something similar here from Genty in week 16.
Huh. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for that. That's pain.
Sorry,
I've had some bad takes. I've had some bad takes in my life, in my career in media. None, I don't think, are worse than saying that Ashton Genty would win you your league this year, which is what I believed in the preseason on a Chip Kelly offense I thought would run the ball. That's why I'm the idiot in the hat. Chris Allen, give me your Grinch for this weekend. Oh, good Lord. Are you doing this to me, too? What are you both doing to me?
This is really awkward. Yeah. So, I'm going to say a Grinch for this is a tight end named Brock Bowers. I don't know which team he plays for, but I will say that the team that he's playing for has a projected point total of less than 12 points by Vegas. So I can't advocate for that. As an analyst, I cannot recommend folks to start players on a team with projected points less than 12. That just doesn't seem right. But okay, Geno Smith is supposed to be back, so we don't get the Kenny Pickett less than 70 passing yards experience. Okay, Well, the last time that we saw Geno Smith, the man was fighting for his life behind that offensive line when it was against the Denver Broncos. I mean, over half of his dropbacks, he was under pressure. And so, yeah, Kenny Pickett took 4 sacks, 64 yards. Geno Smith, pressure, took multiple sacks against the Broncos. This is what Bowers has to deal with. And that's just on that side of the ball. On the defensive side, seeing the Houston Texans, it's even worse because for the non-Trey McBride tight ends that have played against the Texans, they've allowed the fewest yards to tight ends in the entire league. I mean, the best performance outside of the Trey McBride that we saw last week was Brenton Strange, who got 61 yards and a touchdown, and that was all the way back in week 3. I mean, recent history, Travis Kelce, 8 yards, Tyler Warren, 22 yards. The completeness of this Texans defense has just been too much for opposing offenses. So I understand you've got Brock Bowers. You probably can't find too many other better options, but I would say try and insulate your roster because looking at the offensive side of the Raiders and also what they're going to face on defense, I wouldn't be expecting too terribly much, at least from a joy standpoint in your semifinals.
You are both cotton-headed ninny muggins. And that's all I have to say about that. All right, let's get to some hurry-up offense coming from the YouTube chat. We'll put the clock up. We'll figure out how many of these questions we can get asked from this process. We'll start with RYGY, who says, got to flex one. Mitchell, Estime, or Coker. What do you think, Harmon?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I really want to say Jalen Coker here. I'm very excited about what I'm seeing with Jalen Coker, but I think Adonai Mitchell is the correct answer. Him and Brady Cook had a pretty nice connection. I swear, I know the final stat line was terrible for Brady Cook. I swear he actually started that game playing a little bit better than how it looked at the end of it. So I think you can trust AD Mitchell here. Famous last words.
Oh, that's incredible that we've gotten to that point. All right, next question comes up from Jamilix, who says, half PPR, flex RB2, Jones, Carter, Estime, Santa emoji. What do you think, Chris Allen?
I'd prefer Aaron Jones or Michael Carter, and I would lean Michael Carter again just for the, I would say, game environment concerns for Aaron Jones. Yes, he'll likely start the game. Yes, we've still seen him involved in the passing game with J.J. McCarthy back under center, but it's more of what does that game flow look like and the potential for them overpowering the Giants. So I'll go Michael Carter here.
Yeah, well, he didn't really clarify. Maybe Santa was included, in which case you play Santa. Next one, Supercharger 2117, who says, PPR, Bucky's my RP1, RB1, Dowdle or Gainwell for my RB2. What do you think, Harmon?
Oh, man. I think Kenny Gainwell is not the honorable answer, but I kind of think he's the right answer here. And the reason that I think I would chase that just reception floor from him in a game where the Steelers will actually have to push it is Bucky's a little bit up and down right now. So I think Gainwell might be your safer play.
All right, next question comes in from Baby Eyes 43. Joe Burrow or Baker Mayfield? Simple question, complicated answer. Chris Allen, what do you think?
It's not complicated for me. Y'all know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say Joey B. I know that he's been more of a emo Joe Burrow over these past couple of weeks, but he gets T. Higgins back. Of course, he can continue to pepper Jamar Chase with a bunch of targets. So if he's got his 2 top pass catchers back, I would rather go with Joe Burrow, playing in better weather conditions this week, now being down in Miami, than Baker Mayfield.
All right, the next question's a doozy, and it comes from Rufio LB, who says, full PPR, Olave, Jennings, Sutton, Wilson, pick 3. Michael Carter, Estime, Dowdle, pick 1. Fannin or Waller, and I need the biggest points. Opponent had Barkley and Puka putting up 67.7 so far. That's a lot, Harmon. What do you got?
Ooh, see, if you need the biggest points, I actually would go Waller over Fannin. I definitely think Fannin is a safer, but I think that Waller has the higher ceiling. For the first one, I'd go Olave, I'd go Wilson, and I'd go Juwan Jennings.
Oh, well done by you. You get an extra gift in your stockings this year. Hurric Lane says, full PPR. Henry, Warren, Falcons, Giants, or Lions D. What do you think, Chris Allen?
I'll still go Derrick Henry here. I know that from the points you laid out, Fitz, there's some general concerns from a workload standpoint. Keaton Mitchell eating into some of that rushing share. Still lean the big dog here in December. Between the Falcons and Lions D, Lions D is a bit banged up. I'll go Falcons. Even though it's going to be tough. A lot of dropbacks though from Jacoby Brissett. All
right, the next question comes from Muay Thai Coach 1, who says Purdy or Brissett. Also pick 2, flex Harvey, Wilson, Estime, Olave, Pittman. Played Parkinson over Johnson. That didn't work so well. What do you think, Harmon?
I'm going Harvey and I'm going Olave for the 2 flex ones. And yeah, I also played Colby Parkinson on Thursday, and I hate myself for it. I also played Matthew Stafford. I played Brock Purdy over Matthew Stafford. I hate myself for that, but I do think Purdy over Brissett is the correct answer.
All right, let's see. We got one. No, that's all of them for right now. We're gonna get more of them coming up, but we also got to get back to the Colts. Old man Rivers is back under center in Indianapolis. What's that mean for fantasy managers on Monday night? We'll preview Niners Colts on the other side. Welcome back to this festive holiday edition of Fantasy Football Live. He's Matt Harmon. He's Chris Allen. I'm Jason Fitz. We're with you all the way up to 1 p.m. Want to give a quick shout out to everybody behind the scenes. It works really hard to put these graphics together. We sit here and look like idiots, but it took a lot of work for everybody behind the scenes to put Christmas sweaters on these, to make these Christmas graphics. Really appreciate all of their holiday efforts at this time of the year to make this show so festive. So congratulations to all of you that are watching, because you've made it this far in your playoff journey as well. So let's get you to some actives and inactives so that you know the news you need right now. T. Higgins, active. Drake London, expected to play. Marvin Harrison Jr., expected to play, but should be noted, Shefty says the Cards plan to ease him in, and Woody Marks expected to play. Also, for all of you tracking wide receivers, we did get this tweet from Cam Wolfe. Bills wide receiver Keon Coleman will be a healthy inactive today, per a source. That is a coach decision, not discipline related. Recently activated off IR, wide receiver Mecole Hardman will play in his place. So Cam is telling you right there that Keon Coleman inactive, not due to any sort of injury, not due to sort of any discipline, just coach doesn't want him on the field. So big moment for the Bills there moving forward. Let's get to the one of the games of the week we need to preview, the 49ers Colts. We got Grandpa back on this field. So let's take a look at this. 5.5-point favorite for the 49ers. 49ers 10-4. They're in Indianapolis. The Colts 8-6, trying to stop the free fall. Harmon, what do you have your eyes on in this one?
Yeah, let's talk about the Grandpa. Let's talk about Phillip Rivers. What that offense looked like in his first game since the freaking pandemic. Well, it was pretty clearly a limited offense. I mean, Phillip Rivers unlocks a lot up here mentally, right? I mean, I think that's obviously why he's there, in addition to get some more health insurance for his many kids, get that extended, in addition to do his buddy Shane Steichen a favor. Those guys are longtime friends. He's also there because he has a mental advantage over the quarterbacks that they would be starting otherwise at this point, those inexperienced guys like Riley Leonard and the boys. Rivers was able to come in there and pick out mismatches and get everybody aligned. That's a big part of this, but it is a limited offense with Phillip Rivers at 44 years old. He was in the shotgun on 98.3% of his plays last week. That was the highest among any quarterback last week. 5.3 air yards per attempt, 2.4 average time to throw. This is a quick hitting offense with Phillip Rivers under center. They have all those wide receivers. They have all those tight ends. And guess who led the team in catches and yards last week? Running back Amir Abdullah. That's backup running back. Passing down, space back Amir Abdullah. So it is problematic for Jonathan Taylor because when your quarterback is in shotgun that much, it limits your run game menu. This was a problem for JT when Anthony Richardson was the starter because they were in shotgun so much. That's going to be an issue for him. And also for these pass catchers, you're just not getting, maybe it looks different in week 2 of Rivers starting, but if it's going to look anything like that, you're not going to get a lot of those big in-breaking routes that Michael Pittman was hitting on. The downfield stuff to Alec Pierce. I mean, Josh Downs was more involved last week than he's been in quite some time because he is the slot guy in this offense. So I think it can be an effective offense, one that has some nice wrinkles to it, but it's certainly just way more limited with Phillip Rivers, no matter how cool the story is.
I mean, and that leads me to my biggest story here, which is what does it mean for Jonathan Taylor? In fact, you mentioned the way the offense looks. One of the things that stands out to me, Harmon, is the lack of explosive runs. If you look over the course of the last 6 weeks, 4 of the last 6 weeks, Jonathan Taylor has not had a run of 20 yards or more. So what you're talking about is now everything's just closer. Everything. This is what happens when you're not scared of the passing game necessarily. Like everything just suddenly gets more compact. So you're talking about a running back that over the last few games, 25 carries, 21 carries, 21 carries, 16 carries, all of those. Ever since the 32-carry, 244-yard huge game that he had against Atlanta, it's just not there. The yards per carry is efficient, but it's not great. The explosives aren't there. He's getting the volume of work. It's just not resulting in massive yardage because I don't think defenses are scared of anything else. So here we get all the way to this point in the season, and you feel like Jonathan Taylor is going to be your league winner. And the problem is it's not necessarily just a Jonathan Taylor thing. This is why we talk so much in the offseason about how teams build complementary football, because when you do not have complementary football in December, you just don't get the same level of explosives across the board, which is going to put a lot of us in a bad spot for these fantasy playoffs. Chris Allen, what do you have your matchup mind on this one?
So I'll take the quarterback on the opposite side of this matchup, and I'll look at Brock Purdy here. And Boone laid it out earlier. I think Brock Purdy put any questions about his health to rest after last week. Because remember, he was a bit uneven after coming back in week 11. He was fine against the Cardinals. Then he threw three picks in prime time against the Panthers. And right after the bye, right before the bye, Myles Garrett was chasing him all around Huntington Bank Field. But he looked fully back against the Titans. And I'm not just talking about his passing acumen, because we should have expected that against Tennessee secondary. Like I mentioned earlier, Davis Mills, Shedeur Sanders, the list goes on. The only quarterback to not throw a touchdown against them was Kyler Murray, which says a lot. Anyway, Purdy hitting season highs in EPA per dropback and passing success rate and adjusted yards per attempt. All of that makes sense, but it was seeing his mobility back. That was the trigger for me. I mean, across his 4 games since aggravating the toe injury, Purdy's scramble rate sat around 2-3%, somewhere in there, up to 13% against Tennessee. I mean, he really matched his season total in terms of the amount of rushing touchdowns he was able to create on the ground in that game alone. I think he was at 4, and I think he was sitting around a season total about 7. So after that game, George Kittle was referring to him as a Jesus Christ lizard, the basilisk, how they run across the water, and he compared that to how Purdy was running. I've never heard them call that before, but it was just funny hearing Kittle say it or compare him to that. But we haven't seen that level of mobility for Purdy pretty much since week 1. So if we're already getting the high efficiency from a passing standpoint from this offense, getting the yards after the catch from his receivers, and we're also getting that sneaky mobility, then Purdy should be able to get fantasy managers through week 16 without too much of a struggle at all.
All right, gentlemen, want to get you caught up on some breaking news. We got this tweet from Ian Rappaport, Rap Sheet, coming in saying, Texas running back Woody Marks is expected to be inactive today, sources said. So expect plenty of Nick Chubb. Harmon, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I also am curious how much usage Jahmyr Jordan is going to get in this matchup, because he was somebody who really impressed, I think, last week. Not saying he looked special or anything, but he broke off a long run. He had some efficient plays in that Texans backfield. Nick Chubb is coming off an injury, so I would say hopefully you don't got to use either of these guys. Hopefully at this point your lineup is in a position where you don't need either of Nick Chubb or Jahmyr Jordan, but Jordan might be worth like a speculative pickup if you're a little bit weaker at running back. Just stick him on your bench and kind of see what happens this week.
All right, guys, let's get to some semifinal tough spots. Fantasy decisions we're struggling with all the way down to the wire. Chris Allen, what do you got for a tough spot for you?
What do we do with these Chiefs pass catchers now? And I know everybody's already waxed rhapsodic about this end of the era for the Chiefs, so I don't need to go into what does this mean about the Chiefs from a dynasty standpoint. Fantasy managers are really just staring down the barrel of what should we expect for Xavier Worthy? What should we expect for Travis Kelce if you're riding them throughout the fantasy playoffs? And I mean, we were probably looking at this matchup against the Titans again. Davis Mills, Shedeur Sanders, gave that list out earlier. But now this is the same offense without Patrick Mahomes. But it's also on top of that, no Jalen Moore, no Jawan Taylor, Wanya Morris and his bended knee, like they're on injured reserve. So it's up to Gardner Minshew essentially to save the day. But luckily there are a couple of similarities between how Minshew played in the last scheme that he operated in when he was out in Vegas with your Raiders, Fitzy, and the infrastructure he operated with last year, that there's at least a case to be made. Because the Raiders, they were calling play action concepts on early downs around 30-31% of their calls like last season, and that fits into the same style of what Andy Reid and Matt Nagy have called for Patrick Mahomes throughout the earlier parts of this year. Now it's a different scheme. I mean, Luke Getsy, he has more of that Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan wide zone scheme type, where Andy Reid is more like traditional Eric Coryell. But still, seeing Minshew target guys like Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, you can see how those guys map right onto guys like Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce. Now I know Travis Kelce's a little bit older than Brock Bowers, and Xavier Worthy is, I would say, slightly less polished of a route runner than where Jacoby Myers is at right now. But in terms of mapping Minshew's past tendencies to his current set of pass catchers, especially in this matchup, you can see how Travis Kelce trying to establish a few more legacy milestones before he hangs them up. Xavier Worthy at least trying to get his connection with Gardner Minshew. I at least see Worthy as a mid-range or high-end wide receiver 2, Kelce as a mid-range tight end 1. I think that makes sense, again, for this matchup in Week 16.
I do not want to bury the lead. I caught that Wanya Morris on Bended Knee reference, and if the 2 album by Boyz II Men doesn't make you want to do some lovemaking, I don't know what's wrong with you as a person. It's one of the greatest albums of all time. All right, Matt Harmon, what do you got for me? Now that I've made things weird for America, what do you want?
Yeah, my question is, can we, and mostly can I, possibly be happy with both Cardinals wide receivers this weekend? Here's the deal. I've got rosters with Michael Wilson. That possibly work out for me. Can I beat Chris with Michael Wilson on my roster? Well, there's another team where Marvin Harrison Jr., the receiver room is so banged up, I got to play him. I don't have a choice, okay? I have to play Marvin Harrison in this spot, and I know he's going to probably be limited. I know that Michael Wilson has really shown so much, and they should continue to feed into him. To me, when I look at this team, I think there are ways where both of these guys can coexist and be productive together. They're dropping back so much. Atlanta has been vulnerable to wide receivers. They've been particularly vulnerable in single high situations where they run a ton of single high coverage, and Marvin Harrison actually leads the team in yards per route against single coverage. There should be spots where Harrison's your X and he's getting plays against the perimeter coverage. There should be spots where Michael Wilson has shown that he can be that X receiver who can get the shot plays there. They can move Harrison around because Michael Wilson has shown that he could play that X receiver position. And yet I was saying that when they drafted Marvin Harrison, that they could be able to do this, they could be able to pull this off. And they've never been able to get both of these guys going together. So can we possibly trust it? I don't know, but here's the deal. I need it to happen. So Arizona, get it together. Get it together. If I can see that it can happen, you guys should be able to see it too. Come on, let's get both of these wide receivers some production here in Week 16.
We are just minutes away from kickoff. We'll get some of your questions answered in just a second. But first, gentlemen, let's get some bold predictions out there. Chris Allen, what do you got for me on a bold prediction?
So we talked around that Vikings-Giants game, and honestly, I'm looking for production to not Jordan Addison, not Jalen Naylor. I'm saying it's going to be Justin Jefferson that gets back into the top 24 conversation. The targets were back there last week, around 30% of the team's targets. Air yards were there. And of course, JJ McCarthy was just rifling passes to Justin Jefferson in the end zone. I think they get a bit more in sync. The Giants secondary we know is one that can be beat. So it's a Hail Mary, but that's what JJ McCarthy typically throws to Justin Jefferson anyway. So he can probably wind up in the end zone and be a top 24 wide receiver for week 16.
Where are you on Justin Jefferson, Harmon?
I feel bad about Justin Jefferson right now.
Best analysis ever.
I think the thing is that he's a lot of what, remember we talked about at the very beginning of the show, like George Pickens being that X receiver. He's going to run the most difficult routes and get the hardest coverage. And Justin Jefferson doesn't play as much X as George Pickens is. He moves around the formation, but he's still primarily that guy. He's going to get the most difficult coverages. He's going to run the big boy routes. And those are the throws that are the hardest to make for any quarterback. And certainly a guy in JJ McCarthy who's still getting his feet wet. So I don't think that anything's wrong with Jefferson, although he's had a few drops here and there. Like that is part of the story. He has left some plays on the field, but there's just very little margin for error with the quarterback situation right now. And that's kind of, I think, the problem here and why he's just been completely unplayable.
All right, I got to give you the shot to give you a quick bold prediction here. What do you got?
Yeah, a DK Metcalf, top 10 wide receiver this week. Detroit Lions, doesn't matter what's going on in their secondary. They do two things. They play a ton of single high, and they play a ton of man coverage. And it's been tough to guess the DK Metcalf weeks. Like the Arthur Smith offense with a bunch of weird names has been about as bizarre as you'd expect. Kenny Gainwell leads the team in receptions. And yet I think this is one of those weeks where DK Metcalf can go off. He's going to get some single high looks. He's going to get one-on-one opportunities. And an old school quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, he knows, hey, I'm reading that coverage pre-snap. This ball is going to DK Metcalf. So I think if you've been kind of frustrated with the up and down production with DK Metcalf, I think you get a top 10 week out of him. You play him in week 16.
All right, gentlemen, let's run some hurry-up offense. We will put 25 seconds up on the clock, and we will figure out exactly how to answer these questions. The first one comes from Ghetto Glory, who says, need 3, Coker, Mike Will, A.D. Mitchell, Addison, and Worthy. What do you think, Chris Allen?
Out of those 3, I mean, the one that quickly sticks out, I mean, A.D. Mitchell still sticks out for me, kind of the same points that Harmon laid out earlier. I mean, Mike Will, yes, I hopefully with Marvin Harrison back, don't care as much. Still think the production's going to go there. And I'll go Jalen Coker. I do like his upside and the amount of explosives him and Bryce Young will be able to hit together. So I'll go those 3.
It's Santa. It's Christmas. We don't care if we're running a little late. Shelby Lynn asks, Purdy or Goff? What do you think, Harmon?
Yeah, I'm going Brock Purdy here, not just because I'm manifesting it for myself after I played him over Matthew Stafford. I need him to score more than 30 points. I also just think he is better set up in a matchup against a Colts team that is just so banged up in the secondary right now.
All right. The next question comes from your boy Blue, who says, ask FFL GM Fantasy FF pregame PPR. Need to flex. Marion Hampton, Pitts, Sutton, London. I started Parkinson at tight end, and my starters, Wilson, Henry, and Judkins. Chris Allen, a lot of information. What do you got for me?
Out of that group right there, I do like Cortland Sutton here. I mean, yeah, I know Pat Bryant's going to be back, going to have multiple options there, but seeing his target share of the past couple of weeks, I do like him. And I'll still go Kyle Pitts here. Don't like that practice participation from Drake London from Friday.
All right, the next question comes from Weird Anime Tales, which I'm amazed I even managed to read. Dak or Shuck? What do you think on this one, Harmon?
I definitely have downgraded Dak Prescott from where I normally would have him just because I think that Chargers secondary is so good against zone coverage, and yet I can't play him. I can't play him behind Tyler Shuck here. I think Shuck has definitely exceeded expectations. He's looked good, but I still think you got to go with Dak and just hope that game turns into a pretty high-scoring affair.
Yeah. All right, the next question comes from Obi O'Brien, which is just fun to say. Who do you start, Bo Nix or Jackson Dart? Chris Allen, what do you think?
I'll still go Bo Nix here. I know Dart has been at least playing somewhat better, but that whole offense has been a little bit more conservative from a plays run standpoint. That Vikings defense is also no joke. And even though it was just 1 week for Bo Nix, seeing him being able to dice up zone coverage, I still like the whole matchup, that game environment between him and the Jags. So I'll go Bo Nix here.
All right, we got the next question coming in from Crusader. There we go, Crusader, who says Waller or Fannin Jr. at tight end, Estime or Carter in flex half PPR league. Harmon, what do you think?
the half PPR element definitely points me to Carter over Estime. I think he's just in line to catch a little bit more passes, dump offs from Jacoby Brissett. And at tight end, talked about this earlier, I think Fannin is the safer play. Waller is the higher ceiling play here in this matchup. I don't know why you gave him the extra L, but so decide kind of what your lineup needs there.
All right, New York to Las Vegas with the next question. Not a flex, but I lost Mahomes and need a quarterback. My best options are Rodgers, McCarthy, or Minshew. Who should I start, Chris?
Man, that is also tough. But for a lot of the points that Harmon was just laying out about DK Metcalf being able to rip up a lot of the Detroit's secondary, they also had Terry and Arnold. Their starting safety just went on injured reserve. I believe they announced that yesterday. I think Rodgers is probably the best in line because McCarthy, Minshew, those are still more, I would say, projections than anything else.
Mark asks, please help. Start 2. I'm already down 50 in my semis thanks to Puka, Ted McMillan, Troy Franklin, Jordan Mason, Jacoby Myers. What do you think, Harmon?
Seeing a lot of these. Is that different? Wait, is that different than
That's
what's
different.
on the
Yeah,
screen?
sorry, I was reading.
Yeah.
I was reading off what's in front of me, but you've got a different one on the screen. We'll go with yours.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
no,
Here-
no. All right,
What
I'll
are
just
these?
ask you a question. Start two. Ted McMillan, Franklin, Mason, Myers. What do you think?
I think I'll go Myers and McMillan there. I don't really trust the backfield rotations for the others.
We like to keep things interesting all to the way very end. That'll do it for this edition of Fantasy Football Live. We're back here every Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m. to help you get your lineup set, and we're around all week. If you enjoy the hat, come check out Yahoo Sports Daily. We're with you 9 to 11 a.m. every single day right here where you're watching this on the Yahoo Sports Network, me and Caroline Fenton. And, of course, you can check out Fantasy Forecast Live on Yahoo Fantasy YouTube. We are all over the place. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to everybody that watches. We're incredibly grateful and thankful that you guys spent so much of your season with us. We appreciate it. Hope you win your matchups and your enemies lose, most importantly. Come back next week. We will be here to help you with your championships.